up a tab, grab a seat, and pour a pint. It's time for the Beer Guys Radio Show.
You want free beer? Go to the brewery.
Dedicated to the art, science, and enjoyment of craft beer.
Yeah, what's wrong with the beer we got?
Now, here are your hosts, Tim Dennis and Aaron Williams.
And it is time once again for the Beer Guys Radio Show. We are radio for the local craft beer movement, broadcasting from our lovely studios at AM 920 The Answer in Buckhead, Atlanta. And I'm Aaron Williams.
And I am Tim Dennis. And on this week's show, we're talking history, Aaron.
All right.
Beer history.
Sounds
More
good.
Specific, North Alabama's beer history. And we have Sarah Bélanger.
That's great.
And joining us on the phone here in a little bit is going to be Kamara Davis. And they are the authors of the book North Alabama Beer.
That's right. It's coming out this week officially. We got our hands on a sneak peek, and we're going to talk all about Alabama history of craft beer and brewing and all that kind of fun stuff because we're history nerds like that, Tim.
It's fun. Beer history is fun.
It is
And
fun.
the official release is the 28th at Straight to L. Is that
Yep.
correct? There you go. Get
Excellent.
your copy there.
Excellent. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But you know what? Speaking of history making, it's going to be a history making weekend next weekend.
Indeed.
It was a history making weekend last weekend because we had one of the biggest beer fests really in the world come to Atlanta. It was awesome. Shelton Brothers.
We did.
Yeah.
We did the whole week. I mean, our beer bars, our restaurants, everything. Then Shelton Fest. It was just a nonstop week of awesomeness over here.
It really was. And then the actual festival itself, we were lucky enough, again, thanks to the guys at Liberator Distributing for 2-day passes. And so we got to try both
Yep.
days.
Liberator and Shelton
And
Brothers.
Shelton Brothers,
Thank
too,
you
of
so
course.
much for
I'm
having us
sorry,
out
yes.
there.
And
It was
we talked to
fantastic.
Dan, of course, before, and it was just amazing. Just to see the amount of craft beer that we couldn't get here in Atlanta, here in Georgia, not only from around the country, but from around the world. Some of the best breweries that you'd ever think of.
Absolutely. You know, something that we seem to be kind of bad about, and I've mentioned this before, we always overbook
Yes.
our interviews, and we don't get to quite enjoy the fest as much. But, I mean, we enjoy the festival just in a different way because we love talking to folks.
Yeah,
Aaron.
we do,
So-
definitely. But,
and we talked to a lot of great folks, but didn't get out and get quite as much beer.
No, we got a little bit, but we
Sure,
were able to
we
talk
tried
to
some good stuff.
Some good stuff, too. So it was a lot of fun. What were some of the highlights for you during the fest?
You know, I've said this a lot, but the Pjolhalla
Yeah, me too.
from Estonia, just really impressed with them. You know, super cool guys. They were one of the interviews that we did. Bearded Iris is good. American Solera I really enjoyed. I'm a huge fan of the Dre Fontainen Oud Goose. So actually, I've had it many times, but I did wait in the line to get some of that.
For those, you got to wait in the line, though.
You do.
I'm not a line waiter per se, but I did the same thing for Drefonten, and I had
Sure.
not had that ever, so I wanted to try
I didn't know
out.
that.
Yeah,
I didn't
so
know. Yes.
it's my first time.
Very cool.
I know. See, I'm not a sour. I'm not a Belgian guy for the most part, up until fairly recently. So
Right.
all these Cantillons and all these Drefontens, they're kind of new to me. So it's
Okay.
a cool experience
So-
and all good stuff. So Brian Hewitt, our field operative.
You did it.
Yes.
I knew you
did
could
this
do it,
time.
man. I knew you could do it.
You were at Shelton Fest too. What are some of the highlights for you?
You know, the Pojala, how did you say it?
Pjolhalla.
Pjolhalla?
I
Yeah.
really enjoyed
yeah.
all of their beers. The first day especially, they were just killing it, but I really enjoyed the, I think it's called Must Cold Columbia. It's a coffee porter. That was, I love coffee. I love beer and coffee together so much. You know, some other ones, the Cantillon Iris, the Three Taverns, the German Chocolate Helms Deep.
Yep.
Insane. And that Birds Fly South paper airplanes. That was pretty
It
wonderful.
was very good.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, I really also enjoyed, of course, all the ones you just mentioned too. But Jing'a was a Chinese brewery from Beijing,
Right.
and they had a lychee sour, and it was wonderful. I really enjoyed that too. And it was cool, you know, like you said, you've got the traditional from France and Switzerland and Belgium, and you had all those breweries from those countries. But we had Thailand, you had Estonia, like we said, China. A lot of cool breweries from around
Vietnam.
the country. Vietnam, that's
Vietnam
right. And
there, so.
it was just a ton of fun.
Couple from Belgium.
Absolutely.
So,
And,
yeah.
it was good. It was good.
Yeah.
So it's,
One or two.
you know, also for the rest of the week, I kind of took it easy, except for the eclipse. We
The
survived
eclipse.
the
You
eclipse.
survived
too.
that, huh?
I know we
So-
did. I was kind of frightened for a second, but
You busted you out a big bottle of beer there, didn't
yes, I was watching the eclipse with my glasses on at a Brooklyn Black Ops, which is about 11 point something bourbon stout, and listening to the Doors. Waiting for the sun. So it got kind of Hunter S. Thompson for a second there.
you? Okay.
Yeah, you know.
All right.
That doesn't
Sounds
happen too often
enjoyable,
for me, but,
man.
you know,
Kick
hey,
back,
listen,
pop a bottle,
I
and
was
wait on
doing
the
me, man.
eclipse.
Exactly.
If the world's going to end, I'm going to enjoy it while it does
That
it,
is
right?
right.
Yes.
Exactly. Let's go ahead and check out Truck and Tap's Beers of the Week. That was a terrible segue, but we got to do it anyway.
Crack open a cold one. It's the Truck and Tap Beer of the Week. Craft beer and food trucks in downtown Woodstock. Truckandtap.com.
I see before us a bevy of beers. Tim.
We have a cornucopia
Ooh, I
of
like
beverage
that.
selections here,
Smorgasbord,
Aaron.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. So of course, Alabama beer is our topic this week, and Sarah was kind enough to bring a lot of great beer with her over here. So when the breweries heard you were coming over, they were kind enough to send us some.
Yeah, they
Very
were so
cool.
excited. They were like, I had to stop them after a certain point.
Don't
So,
do-
yeah.
Well,
Next time, don't do that.
Don't
Yeah, no.
do so, yeah.
They had to fit in my car.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, that's
Gotcha.
so. But shout out to Eric Krieger. When we had Rocket Republic on, we mentioned that we really love their Vapor Trail cream ale with coffee. He sent us a crowler of that, which we pre-gamed with. Enjoyed that quite a lot. Right now we have Straight to Ale. What's that one called, Aaron?
It's Project Juicy Bunny.
Project Juicy Bunny, which is their Northeast style IPA, and we have. On Oktoberfest, we have some Blue Pants beer here. They're hop bursted IPA. Green Bench sent some beers over. Straight to Ale. Just so many great Alabama beers to enjoy today.
You know what? And there's always some great breweries in Huntsville. And people may not think about it, but if you ever get a chance, really make the trip to Huntsville. It's a
It's
fantastic
an absolutely
beer town
fantastic
and a great city.
weekend trip over there
it
for
really
sure.
is, definitely. So looking forward to enjoying some of those beers. But for now, let's check out our headlines.
What's in the news? The beer guys have the scoop.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Time for headlines. Sponsored by Your Pie Perimeter in the Perimeter Place Shopping Center across from Perimeter Mall.
So, Tim, as we alluded to earlier in the show, it's going to be a record or a historic
Week over here.
next week.
More history.
in Georgia.
More beer history,
Exactly. But
Aaron.
we're going to be a part of it. It's very
We are.
exciting. So
We
tell us
are.
what's happening September 1st.
September 1st, our breweries and distilleries in the state of Georgia get the right to sell their product direct to the consumer.
That's crazy.
How about that?
Yes.
We can add some cheering sound effects in later, right?
Oh, yeah, we can do that,
That's
exactly.
it. So, but yes, so we get direct sales September 1st, next Friday. That happens. Great things are going on. There's bottle releases around, lots of stuff, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But, we were talking to Lee Dixon at Shelton Fest, he's with Liberator Distributing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talked to him, he commented that, a lot of breweries have had to deal with these laws for many, many years. And he said, though, I'm kind of glad that our grandparents, our grandpas didn't change these laws because we get to enjoy changing them. So, you know what? You got to look at the silver lining there. Yes, it's been a pain to do it, but boy, is it cool to be involved in those laws changing.
Definitely, and it's going to be a great thing. Of course, Alabama went through this about a year ago, and it's been great for them. And I keep seeing that folks are hiring for taproom managers, for folks to run the bar. I see bars getting built. We were at Jekyll a couple weeks ago. They've got a brand new bar and tap system coming in anticipation of the changes. So it's overall pretty good. Really excited
Good
for it.
stuff, man.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
So interestingly enough, on the national front, craft beer glut starting take its toll on sales. Now I saw this story from Forbes, and I was a little bit concerned, but then I looked at it. It's interesting because you've got, of course, the big AB InBev, Budweiser, Miller, Coors beers. And then, of course, you've got a lot of local breweries, the smaller ones that we're talking about here. But then you've got a lot of them in the middle. Sam Adams, Sierra Nevada, Abita, those type of breweries that have been around
Victory
for a while.
Stone,
Exactly,
all of that
kind of the
scope.
medium-sized beers. And they're the ones that are really kind of feeling the pinch because as more smaller breweries and more regional breweries kind of come up, there's not as much demand for their stuff nationwide. And so, for example, Ken Grossman from Sierra Nevada said his retail store sales have fallen by almost 7.5% this year as of July 16th. So as the smaller breweries grow, some of the medium, some of the historically traditional beers have kind of pulled back on their sales. So it's kind of
And calling them medium brewers to the craft beer community, these are the big boys.
Exactly.
In craft beer. Now, these aren't the mega brewers, the macro brewers, but Sierra Nevada's large.
Oh, of
Sam
course.
Adams, these
Yeah.
are big breweries, but they're feeling the pinch. And we talked about it before, Aaron, the drive to local and even kind of hyper local. People want beer made in their backyard, and more people have the opportunity to get the beer that is made in their backyard.
Yeah, when you get the availability of different styles of beers, that sort of has an adverse effect on it as well. Kentucky Bourbon Stout, KBS from Founders, is usually a huge hyped release, and it was a big deal
Kentucky
this year.
Breakfast
Kentucky
Stout.
Breakfast Stout. I'm sorry, Kentucky Breakfast Stout. It's the beer talking.
It does
It does
man.
that. Yeah, exactly. But you know what I was talking about. KBS.
I knew it. KBS.
So you have to keep in mind, though, that the smaller guys in the middle range are going to feel it more. It's going to be a higher percentage of loss because they're not as big as the big guys. So the big guys are probably getting hit too, but it's a smaller percentage, I'm guessing. That'd be my assumption. So the middle guys are going to get hurt the most by the growth in the smaller sector.
So the smaller sector is growing, but again, the kind of bigger guys are feeling that pinch as they kind of get squeezed between the two.
Yeah.
The bigger, small. Okay. Well, you know what? We need to take a break. We could go on about this forever and ever. But when we come back, we're going to be talking to Sarah and Kamara about their book, North Alabama Beer, and we'll be back right after this.
Beauty Clark, we survived.
Dun, 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 dun.
Did that make sense? Because I'm like,
Totally
if they're
sense.
taking,
Yeah,
they're taking
but I
section
don't-
taking from both sectors.
So
like
are you
big
saying
and
macro brewers don't feel it as much as like large craft
it's a
brewers?
smaller percentage. Like if they're losing similar
I think
volume
it's a
in gallons,
much larger percentage. I would think the absolute opposite. That because now here's the thing that
but
gets you with
you losing X number of gallons is going to hurt the medium range guy a lot more than that same amount of X amount of gallons. Going to hurt the larger guy because it's a
but you're looking
larger
at percentage losses.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
that. So
assuming they're both the same. Now I don't know if they are, but I was just thinking that.
So here's one thing that is interesting when they talk about the craft brew growth, and I'd have to look at the exact stats to see how they tie all this in. But one thing that slowed the growth of craft beer last year was acquisition of large craft breweries by the macro brewers, because that slid them into that category.
It's true.
So you buy all them up, that takes them out of that.
That's a good
out
point.
Of that market.
Takes them right off of that. Yeah.
So
Hello.
so you look at that, and you look at
Hey, Kamara. I'm sorry. Wait, stop, guys. Sorry. Hey, Kamara.
Yes.
Hey, sorry about that. This is Aaron from the Beer Guys Radio Show. How you doing?
Awesome. How are you?
Great. We've got Sarah here, and we were just engaged in a very industrious debate about micro and macro
market
brews.
growth.
So market growth.
Cameron, this
Discussion.
is Tim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, so super easy. We're just going to go ahead and get into this segment, and we'll talk to you and Sarah about the book and about what's going on, and drink some beer. It's too bad you're not here, but
I know, right?
the beer that
We have beer.
and we have lots of beer. It's
Lots
great.
They
of
have
beer.
mead too.
And Sarah, that's
So
right.
I even have
Yes.
something.
Oh, mead.
Yeah.
Mead. I
Mead.
thought you said
Also
mead.
her, but
I'm
No,
like,
mead.
oh,
okay.
me. No, mead.
Mead.
Oh, and I'm
And
here
you.
also.
And
yes,
Sarah.
exactly.
Yes.
Both
ego-
are so very sweet.
The ego
Yes,
in this booth
right,
is just kind of
yeah.
blowing up. I'm just kidding. That's all right.
Boom,
This is really
boom.
tasty. I like this juicy bunny. This was it.
Project Juicy Bunny.
Project
Yeah,
Juicy
and it's a
Bunny.
one and done. So
Straight to ale.
You know,
You're
those
killing
are tough. They're fun, but they're tough. Like I've hyped these guys so much lately, but Southern Prohibition. You know, that selfie destruct.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, this is great. So I emailed my buddy there that's a brewer and said, hey man, is this going to make it to Georgia? He's like, nope. This is it. So, and then they had another one that's I think it was called Hex Clouds, maybe.
Yeah.
That's just a big hazy IPA, and I am a Southern Prohibition fanboy.
Me too.
Really been enjoying what they've been doing
too.
lately.
All righty.
We want to do this.
Let's do. You ready? Is it? Do you want to call you Cammy or Camera?
Tammy's fine.
Cammy. Okay.
We can
Tammy?
do that.
You have the greatest accent, by the way. I'm just going to tell you that right now. It's fantastic. For some Yankees like myself, no, it's right.
Well, I was about to say, you should have some pretty fabulous accents over there in Georgia.
Well, we try, but I've been down here about 17 years, so I can do a little bit. But and Tim, you've been here for about the same time, right? About 17 years.
And
but-
we don't get them much in Atlanta area.
No.
Atlanta's you get about a little further than an hour outside of the city, and you start to get into the southern accents. But in Atlanta, there's so many people here they're not
Transplants.
Atlantans, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's funny because my kids are all in the school system. I have 3 of them. None of them have accents.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. It's like I would assume that they would have at least some of it, but none of them have it.
You know
So-
something I saw the other day, Aaron, totally unrelated to what we're talking about? Apparently there was a huge settlement of Chinese immigrants in the Mississippi Delta.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so you've got these people that have been there for a couple generations now. So you have Chinese people with these thick southern
Country
Mississippi
accent.
Delta accents. It's they did it. It was like a mini documentary, and it was
That
so
is funny.
and it makes sense. I went to Greensboro one time and I stopped in a Chinese restaurant. I'm telling you, some of the best Chinese food I've ever had in my
Yeah.
life. I'm like, Greensboro, Mississippi, really? So yeah.
One of my best friends is a Chinese from Greensboro, Mississippi.
See,
That's hilarious.
isn't that something? Yeah,
China sippy.
Technically,
Yes,
yeah,
my
I
wife is.
think he's like third generation.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
My wife is
Interesting.
Chinese first generation, but yeah, it's so funny because I'll go to a McDonald's or something and they'll be like, I'll see like an Asian woman there. She's like, "What do y'all have?" Because there's one at the McDonald's that we work
Yeah.
at. So it always throws me off, and I'm like, okay, whatever. It's
Crazy stuff.
it's my terrible bias.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess for me, it never struck me as odd because I have a cousin whose mother is Vietnamese, and my cousin has a thicker accent than I do. We grew up together. So it wasn't until we started traveling kind of outside of our small town that people were looking at her like, where, what? I
Right.
don't understand this.
Yep.
That's awesome. All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and get this started. We're gonna do a little
I
music.
took
and
it
then
out. Am
intro
I
you,
bringing it in or you?
You took it out. I'll bring it in.
You
So,
got it, man.
We good?
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. Shake and bake!
And welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show, beerguysradio.com, and of course on Facebook, Instagram, and all the socials. We are broadcasting from AM 920 The Answer Studios in Buckhead, Atlanta, but we are talking Alabama beer today. Sarah Bélanger,
Yes.
nice, and Kamara Davis, or Cammie Davis, joins us on the phone. They are the authors of North Alabama Beer and Intoxicating History, coming out actually next week. So,
Monday.
Monday. So excited.
Yep.
So
Very
excited.
cool.
So thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us. This
Absolutely.
is exciting.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So poor Cammie is on the phone. She's not with us today because you brought with us a bevy of beers from
I did.
Alabama, and so we just have to drink it all ourselves.
I know. And
Well-
I'm leaving it. It's
well-
not coming with me, so it's
Oh,
staying
wow.
here.
All
That's
right.
the greatest day ever.
That's
Kimmy,
an
we'll tell
ultimatum.
you how good all these beers are, if that helps any. So,
That's good.
yeah.
That'll help my feelings a little.
Okay,
Okay,
good. So we'll start off with what hopefully is an easy question. Sarah, how did you get involved in the craft beer world?
I actually got into it. I have a friend, Tori, in Birmingham, and so she's a hardcore. I mean, she's a chef, so she was dragging me all over the Birmingham beer scene, and so by the time I moved back to Huntsville, the Huntsville beer scene was exploding. So it was just a natural progression.
Just
and
right
I'm a food
into it, huh?
photographer and a
Okay.
food writer. And so I just added craft beer to my repertoire.
They do
and-
kind of
yeah,
go hand in hand. We
exactly.
have a
It's
friend here
perfect.
that's a big, food beer writer
Mhm.
and that, and they're so intertwined. So,
Yeah.
Cammie, how about you? How did you get involved in the craft beer world?
Really, it was through the politics. I've always been fascinated with Alabama politics, and anytime somebody tries to stand up and change something, I pay attention. And so I knew that the free hop struggle was going on, and that was really what I paid attention to until Sarah and I decided to work on a project together.
And the good thing is, if you get involved in politics, you're going to need a beer. So that worked out really well, right? Yes.
Maybe something stronger than a beer after
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah,
So.
no doubt.
Definitely. Now, before we go to the free the hops movement, which we'll get to, of course, later on in this interview, let's go way, way back. Northern Alabama has quite a history with alcohol. It was a big part of everyday life back in really when the area was founded in the early 1700s, 1800s.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny because a lot of people, when we were doing it, were surprised that they kind of think that beer is a new thing, but it was very much a part of the family household, and the children would drink it, and it was considered much healthier than water because it didn't have any, any bad bacteria in it, and so people just drank it all the time, everywhere.
But of course, back in the day, it was only like 3.5, 4%.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't.
It
It wasn't
9,
quite.
10%.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't quite what it is now. But of course, there's harder liquor, and it was a really good way for the farmers to preserve their crops. So if they had an excess that was going to just rot in the silo, they would just distill it or make beer out of it and use it. So
That makes sense.
So going back, with people and drinking that big part of life, recommended over water, and that it was just
Yeah, it was-
intertwined with
yeah.
life there. So, but at the time, it was usually made at home. It was something you
absolutely,
made on the
yeah.
on-
Families made it. A lot of women, especially, were the brewers of the household, and so yeah.
So the Huntsville Brewery was the
The
first in
Huntsville was
Alabama.
the first. It was two brothers. It was James and William Badlin, and they actually were kind of prominent in Huntsville. So they had a bakery and they had a grocery store and they had several things. But they decided to do a brewery, and they started in September of 1819, which was 3 months before Alabama got statehood. So we had beer before statehood, the way it
Nice.
should be.
That's
Yeah.
right, absolutely.
But unfortunately, they had a bad run of bad luck.
They did. It was a disaster for them. So, awesome pun.
Thank you very
There you
much.
go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad. I was happy about that. So yeah. So now, Cammie, it's interesting when you talk about the early days and the early history of Alabama. Coleman actually was founded by German immigrants, and they had a brewing in that area, correct?
They did. And then as Alabama politics rolled on, Coleman became quite famous for the Oktoberfest, not because of the great beers, but because it was the largest dry Oktoberfest for years and years and years. And that's very stark difference from coming from a German heritage.
That sounds like the worst Oktoberfest ever.
I've heard it was.
See? Yeah.
Yeah, like,
It's like
a lot
we're
of,
just going to keep going with it.
yeah, exactly. Some people are like, it's so lovely. They have a doll, show and everything. And then like beer people are like, it was horrible.
Yeah. Come to Oktoberfest for the doll show.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
Yeah.
We have schnitzel. So, okay. So moving forward a little bit from that pre-prohibition time period. So I don't think a lot of people know this, but pre-prohibition, there really was an alcohol problem.
Oh, absolutely.
In
It was
the country.
definitely, they had a legitimate concern. It was definitely a problem. You had a lot of people going in and spending all of their money, and a lot of people were dying of alcoholism, and they had just people staggering around all the time. So it was certainly an issue, and a lot of violence was coming from the saloons. So it did need to be kind of addressed. But
Because
obviously,
a lot of the towns were kind of murdery.
yeah,
at that
they were
time,
pretty.
right?
Actually,
Yes.
Decatur they had an alley that they called like Murder Street. I think that it was a murder alley, and
Murder
yeah, and it
alley.
was just
Uh-huh.
That sounds like
because
fun.
of
What
the
a
sheer
great
amount of
nickname.
bodies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see?
That sounds like some of the streets in Buckhead here.
It does indeed. Or your parks, right, Brian?
Yeah, my park. Yes.
So how did the progression into prohibition in Alabama happen?
How did it end? Is that what? Okay.
Leading up to it.
Leading up to it, so it just they had a lot of issues with violence, and then they had a huge kind of religious and women's movement to create prohibition, and so they started educating children in the schools, and it was kind of ludicrous. They would teach science, and like in their temperance classes, they would teach the science that if you drank too much beer in one sitting, you would combust into blue flames. And it was quite extreme. And so by the time those children kind of got to adulthood,
Fear
and
that
yeah,
devil alcohol.
they were pretty
right?
terrified
Yes.
of combusting into blue flames.
Kind of
so,
like
yeah.
a reefer madness there in the 60s.
Absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So it did. They just went whole hog, and they just completely got rid of all alcohol, down to I think it was less than 5%.
Yeah, because there was, I think in Georgia when they did prohibition, they still had, I think they called it cereal beer or something
yes,
like that.
exactly, and even
But that wasn't allowed in
that was
Alabama.
banned in
was it?
Alabama. Yeah, so I think it had to be less than 0.5% of alcohol.
Too
before-
much for
yeah,
Alabama
exactly.
at the time,
It was
right?
too much,
Did I read
absolutely.
right that you had actually gone into prohibition in Alabama before it was nationally
Yeah,
prohibited?
in 1915.
Okay.
3 years before, yeah, and then they left it after too. So
So that's
Make
fun.
sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Cammie, I'm sorry we're leaving you behind here for a second, but it was interesting reading your book. Carrie Nation, a very famous prohibitionist, probably one of the most famous in the country. She actually visited Huntsville.
Yes, she did. Sarah and I, when we first started researching, I had known about Carrie Nation. I'd been up to Eureka Springs. She had a very prominent presence in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and I said, Sarah, if we could just find Carrie Nation, this would be awesome. And so we dug around. Sarah called me. She said Carrie Nation was here, and we found the first source material, but it didn't match what we had been told. The story that we had been told is everybody knows that Carrie Nation was famous because she would go into the breweries with her axe and tear down the bars and terrorize everyone with her axe. Well, when we found it in our local newspaper, it was Carrie Nation was here. She spoke. Everybody adjourned peacefully, and she moved on to Florence. So
That's no
we
fun.
did-
What a disappointment, Carrie.
yeah, I
So,
know
yeah.
exactly.
It's like,
She
why
just-
did Carrie Nation decide to act right in Huntsville? You know?
Yeah.
Doesn't make for a
I
good
will
book
say she
writing,
had
does
like
it?
she had hundreds of guys following her and sort of jeering her, and it was she kind of created a big draw at the very least. So
A hullabaloo. As
Yes,
it
Hullabaloo,
was
she
back in
did.
the day. So yeah, interesting. Again, another thing that came out of the Prohibition movement was actually water fountains, which is something I thought that was really interesting.
I know. I was really surprised by that. And so what a lot of women's groups, decided to put public water fountains out in front of saloons. That way, there was no reason for the men to pop into the saloon for a water and then get distracted by, whiskey
Because that
or
happens to me
whatnot.
all the time. Oh,
Yeah.
hey, I just need a glass of water. Oh, hey, they've got liquor.
Oh, yeah,
Open the
exactly.
fridge and there's Dasani next to 12 bottles of beer.
Yeah.
I should drink that water.
Yeah.
I should.
To be fair,
So-
vodka and water look very
They
much
do.
alike.
Yes, they do.
Especially when you keep them in your Brita pitcher like you
Yes.
do, Brian.
I mean, that's
So-
how you purify it.
Yes. So, well, how did that go with the water fountains? Because weren't people discouraged for drinking it? Had it kind of
Yeah,
changed
I mean, I think
at that
people
time?
had sort of they eventually just closed the saloon. So I mean,
Oh,
I think that they got when their techniques weren't working, they went ahead and just got it legally changed. So
Yeah, that kind of works.
yeah,
Okay.
the laws made it. Well, it kind of worked. They could no longer legally drink beer. So
Gotcha. So that
Okay,
changed.
that'll do
Excellent.
it.
We're going to take a break right now. You're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show, talking with Sarah Bélanger and Cammie Davis, the authors of North Alabama Beer and Intoxicating History. We'll be back right after this. That's tasty. I really like
I love white stouts.
I do too.
So I
I was trying to put my finger on what on earth this was.
It's
Okay.
tasty.
have a conceptual beer that Brian and I have talked about. I want to do a
Hey, Todd, what's going on?
blueberry pancake
Philip and
breakfast
Ron?
white stout.
that
Yes.
sounds amazing.
So like a little bit, have
Oh,
the
Tiny's here too. I didn't see
the
that. too.
toasty malts there.
I'm not
get
getting
the
any updates
blueberry.
on this.
See, because you're just not as cool as I am. That's why.
I get nothing. I've seen only my message, so I can't see what's going on here. I closed it a couple of times.
Yeah,
Just
I
sucks.
see it. I can see
Yeah.
people. I don't think people are just being talkative today. They're just
No.
listening. They're just getting their history lesson.
That's
Exactly.
good.
That's all.
Alright.
So yeah.
It was funny, guys. Speaking of all this, the craziness, we just got an email this afternoon from our building manager.
Mhm.
Apparently, someone's been smoking marijuana in the building next to us, like in the bathroom.
Okay.
So we're like, do not smoke or vape or smoke marijuana in any of the rooms, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like,
It's
and
like,
I just I
we
told, I
need to
told my
tell
boss, and
people
I'm like,
this, huh?
we're gonna move to the second floor of that
Right.
building across the street if that's okay, because that's where the party is apparently.
Change all
So-
our tune music to reggae.
exactly. It's all fish.
Aaron keeps
all day long.
running over there,
Yeah.
breathing
Exactly.
deeply.
And, yeah.
Right back. Excuse me. Allegedly. That's right.
Boy,
you
that's
wouldn't even have to change your logo that much.
no, not
I mean,
much
just
at all.
change
We
the
could
leaf.
We
you're
figured
good.
out
add a little
that's what
leaf,
it's-
yes.
our
Weed
next-
Guys Radio.
Guys
No,
Radio.
It's Bong Guys Radio.
The Bong
Guys Radio.
Exactly. That's it.
Instead, we'll pop cans on air and said,
Exactly. We'll do that. Allegedly. That's it.
"Welcome to the Bong Guys Radio Show."
Welcome to a lot of pauses though. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
exactly.
Like,
Welcome
Stan, thanks for joining us.
to the Bomb Guys
Thanks for
Radio
joining
show.
us. So, my buddy Stan in Fort Worth, Texas, he just popped in here with us, and Stan is a fantastic home brewer. He's given me, back when I actually homebrewed, gave me tons of advice on that. Great brewer, and I promised him probably a year ago I'd send him a Beer Guys shirt, and I keep forgetting. So
well, we'll get a new shipment in about
we
6
do.
months apparently.
We have the
from,
new design
yes.
in, and we'll get those, and I'll hook up Stan.
Isn't he
there,
like a
so.
9th level black belt beer judge or something
I
like
think
that?
so. He
Yeah,
is. He is
he's-
a BJCP certified.
Ninja,
Stan, are you
Jay?
certified? Have you went master yet?
He's certifiable.
He's certifiable. This is the truth.
Aren't we
yes.
all?
So, but yeah. So, shout
right.
out to my buddy Stan, who is far enough north that I don't think he's going to get hurricaned.
No.
So,
Hurricaned. I know. I was listening to
Yeah.
all this.
But
all
we've
the
got
coverage.
I've got buddies in Houston. We have our friends at What's on Tap Radio.
Yep, and
Covering
Troy
the
as
Houston
well,
beer
right?
scene. My buddy Troy, my
yep.
buddy Seth. I actually know quite a few people in Houston. So, be safe there, folks.
Exactly.
Sounds like
Stay
a bad
safe.
one coming through.
No
So.
kidding. So, all right, you ready for some
We
whales?
ready to do
All
this?
right.
Is it whale time?
Yep,
I'm
so-
cheating on whales this week, by the
No,
way.
I think it's good. I think that's
Yes.
I think that's pretty solid. So let's,
Let's
go ahead
do
and
it.
Knock it out.
Ahoy there, mateys! Hunting whales? We've got you covered with Tim's Whale of the Week.
Now, is this cheating or not for this whale of the week?
This has not been available in Georgia in nearly 100 years.
Okay, touche.
So
There you
I'd
go.
say that's pretty whaley,
I'll
wouldn't
give
you?
I'll give that to you.
So
Absolutely.
our whale of this week, Aaron,
yes.
is buying beer at a brewery in Georgia.
I mean, it's crazy, but it's like I'm so excited. To
It's
think
so close,
that
man.
I can walk in a brewery, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have a pint of that.
Give me a pint of that.
And they're going to charge me. And
Give me a case of that.
Exactly.
Right? So that's it. Maybe it's cheating a little bit, but it's a big day. Save up your beer money all week. Go out Friday through the weekend and all that. Go to your Georgia breweries and purchase beer. Alabama friends, drive to Georgia and buy beer at our breweries. That's it.
Absolutely.
So you can go back to supporting your Alabama breweries and drinking local the next day.
Yeah.
But,
speaking of, by the way, I was able to crack open one of these Green Bus White Stout.
Yes.
One of the newer
It's
breweries
phenomenal.
And they've
It's our
been
newest.
open for about 7 or 8 months now,
A
right?
year.
Already a
They're
year?
having
Okay.
their year, I think, in September.
Awesome,
so,
awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations. But this white stout is phenomenal. I really enjoy
That's
the
good
white
stuff.
stout, and that's
Very
good. That's good stuff. So excellent. Well, speaking of good stuff, let's go ahead and get back to the talk now. We're talking with Sarah Bélanger and Cammie Davis, the authors of North Alabama Beer and Intoxicating History. It's coming out on Monday, folks. So
yes,
we'll have details on how to get that book here in just a
good
second.
stuff.
But,
so we'll
yeah, go ahead.
so we'll speed up a little bit here.
Yeah.
Prohibition was enacted.
Yes.
Initially, there was a drop in crime in that,
Yep.
but as people still wanted their alcohol, it moved underground, which brought a new crime element
Yes.
to it.
Yeah.
So
And profitability. I mean, they were making a lot of money in Alabama, but not legally.
that's
so
right. So
no
it's,
taxes. Yeah.
you know, tax revenue, the crime element, that there were a
Yeah.
lot of reasons they
Absolutely.
said this isn't working.
Yes.
Both nationally as well as
Yes.
statewide.
Yeah.
So nationwide prohibition ends, but Alabama held on for a little while.
They
longer,
did.
correct?
Yep. 4 more
Okay.
years. So.
All right. And then kind of how did it go when that was repealed? What kind of happened at that
It
time?
was obviously really so they ended up repealing it because the schools ran out of money. So they literally had to pay for the
Okay.
schools. And so there you go, alcohol paying for education.
That's right.
And so they ended up repealing it, and people were really freaking out. But it was very kind of oppressive how they had the laws. So they had a law in place to ensure that the crazy saloon days didn't come back. So
Yeah,
they
and
did do a lot of restrictions. Yeah.
And of
for
course,
that.
you had the 3-tier system and
Exactly,
a lot of
and-
restrictions in
yeah,
place with that
exactly.
too. So
kind
the
of
ABC
overzealous
stores,
when they put the laws back in.
Yeah,
right?
and so and then they never changed. So at the time, it was probably great, and people could get their alcohol. But then you go forward 60 years, and it's still essentially the same. So yeah.
But things started to change a little bit. Of course, in 1992, you had the Brew Pub
Yes,
Act that
yes.
passed.
And again, they were really terrified of changing that the saloons would come back, and there was a lot of that fear that we saw later with Free the Hops. But again, they made it so oppressive that even though people were like, "Yay, brew pub," it just none of them could financially survive. It wasn't viable. So
Yeah.
And Cammie, I think this is kind of your area of expertise, right? Kind of
definitely Free the Hops. Yeah.
the Free the Hops and Forward movement, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so Free the Hops, what is it, and kind of how did that get started?
So Free the Hops is a nonprofit organization that was founded to really educate the population and change the laws in Alabama to be able to have a craft beer industry. It all started back in 2004 with a gentleman by the name of Danner Klein. He was a student in Birmingham going to college, and he took a trip out to Texas, and he had a really good beer. And he's like, wow, why have I not been drinking this? He comes back to Alabama, does some research, and says, oh, well, we have these restrictions, one of which was ABV had to be less than 6%. So he started doing some research, and based on his research, he reached out up into the Carolinas. They were going through their Pop the Top campaign, and he really just sat down with a group of like-minded folks, set some goals, and they just started moving forward as an organization.
Now, kind of a fun fact here about Danner Klein, he's actually running for Senate,
Yeah.
for a Senate position in Alabama right now. So
Absolutely.
He loved politics, beer and politics.
that's it.
Yeah.
See,
That's
got
it.
involved in politics because of beer. Excellent. We know some people that were kind of in politics, or I guess the legal system, that decided to go the
Yeah.
beer direction
Yeah.
instead.
Exactly.
So, but from there, you guys really, I mean, you changed fast.
Oh my God.
You know,
it was,
when you look at compared to some other states,
Yeah.
once Alabama, I mean, you just got homebrewing legalized in 2013.
Yeah,
correct?
absolutely. Yeah.
So, you know, when you think that so many breweries are founded because guys are homebrewing
Yeah,
and they want to step
absolutely.
up, you know, that had to be kind of, you know, when you see a brewery pop up in a state, if you saw one in Alabama start before 2013,
hmm
you know they're homebrewing. I mean, they
Yeah,
have to.
and
So
Huntsville
Yeah.
used to back in the 80s. They had a kind of illicit homebrewing group called the Madison Sobriety Club. That was where all the guys would kind of
sure, that
start. Yep,
underground brewing,
underground,
right?
yeah.
I know
a
a
long
guy who's
time.
got some yeast.
That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why are you buying that 50-pound bag of malted barley?
Several of them didn't even know it was illegal for
Oh,
several
okay.
years.
Well, it
that
doesn't
they
make
said,
sense.
yeah.
I mean, it's
That's
just
what they, yeah.
because after Jimmy Carter, of course,
Exactly.
Sure.
you know, legalized homebrewing across the country, you would think you'd be okay. And
Yeah.
it's like it's something as innocuous as homebrewing.
Yeah.
Come on, that's
Right.
That's bad.
Mhm.
Just making, especially when you go back to the frontier days, it was expected and
Oh, absolutely.
commonplace. So,
Yeah.
but that's now, Cammie. You also another law that Free the Hops helped pass was your gourmet beer law, correct?
Absolutely.
Well, Cammie, I got a question for you. What's wrong with the beer we got?
Oh.
The famous good old Alvin Holmes. We
That's
use
right.
that. We use that segment on our
No,
our
it's
intro.
awesome.
We have
It's
to.
one
so.
of my favorite things of all time.
Yeah,
that,
but
what's
there
wrong
was
with beer guys?
opposition to that.
Yeah.
You know, you're looking to bring in these beers and raise the ABV and that, but and there was opposition, but Free the Hops pushed for that, correct?
Job position. You know, alcohol and politics. Alcohol's essentially the hot potato. No politician wants to touch it because their constituency still is in this mindset of, ooh, the crazy saloons, people going blind and bursting into blue flames. So it really took the organization a lot of effort to just educate not just the legislators, but their constituents on what they were trying to do, what the truth of it was. I mean, we even had legislators stand on the floor doing scare tactics and inflammatory statements like, oh, if you let them raise it to 13.9, then the next thing you know, we're going to have 80% proof beer.
That would be awesome.
That's it. Yes.
But I always, you know, thought about it, you know, back in the day, of course, when we were young and teenagers and would never do, the people in this room would never do such a thing. But, you know, I've heard stories of people that would like ask them to buy beer. It's not like you're asking them to buy barrel-aged stouts at 13
Oh my gosh.
cents.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
What
And
what
that was-
16-year-old
and that
is going to pay $5 for a beer?
Exactly.
Right.
And that was actually one of Danner Klein's retorts to this. One of the legislators' big points on the floor was, why would we make it easier for teenagers? It's the drink of choice. And Danner said, beer is not the drink of choice. Cheap beer is the drink of choice.
Exactly,
And exactly to Sarah's point, what teenager is going to put down $6 for one beer?
When you could
Right.
buy like, you know, a handle of those pop-off plastic vodka for like $10.
Exactly.
So,
Or a
and you
case
know,
of hams.
there's not a lot of breweries that would really want to make a beer that high, that much over, say, 14%, because it's a totally different flavor profile. You do move into the boozy flavor
Yeah.
profile. Now there's some one that I love, Black Tuesday from
Brewery.
the brewery, and
Yeah.
kind of it runs 18.6 to 19.2, but it's a strong beer. It's also $30-something for a 750
Yeah.
milliliter bottle. You're not going to see kids out chugging these. They're not going to go for that. They'll go for the
They won't go
$3
very long
bottle
if
of
they chug
vodka.
it.
That's right. So
That's exactly right.
yeah. So they got that passed, and then moving forward, homebrew in 2013. And we're going to need to take a break here in just a minute, but we come back, we're going to talk about your growth some since then. So we'll be back in just a minute with Cammie and Sarah talking North Alabama beer. We'll be back right after this. I think timing was good on that,
No, that was
right?
perfect.
That was good?
perfect.
All right.
I didn't mean to step on you earlier when I
No.
said something about the Prohibition, because I'd read that
Yeah.
beforehand on like Wikipedia. I'm like, oh my God, they went into Prohibition first. I'm like,
Isn't that
yeah.
crazy?
oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm
Didn't
not too
Georgia
surprised,
as
but-
well?
Georgia
I'm
was
trying
pretty
to remember
close. I
from
think Alabama was the first to go to prohibition.
Yeah.
I
They
know.
were.
I think
But Georgia
Georgia
was
did
close.
statewide before national,
Yeah.
and I know they kept it after national prohibition ended.
I think most of
Yeah.
the southern states did. If I'm
Who was
correct,
it?
but,
Someone went for like until like the 60s.
Did they?
Yeah,
That's
it was
crazy
some
stuff.
Probably
Midwest.
Mississippi or
It was
all
some
Midwest is
Midwest,
like-
yeah.
I was
Yeah.
It was
some
crazy.
Amish country
You
or
know what? It
something.
might have been Kansas.
Okay, that
And
makes sense.
It was
Yeah.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, even so, it's funny. My family's all from up north, and even I remember when I was a kid, they used to have crazy blue laws, even up in
Well, hell,
Maine.
Oh, yeah.
Kentucky still has. Is it Kentucky that has blue counties? Like where Kentucky or Tennessee? One of the places where they're distilling, they have blue. Just dry counties.
I think where is
completely
it
dry.
Lynchburg?
Lynchburg, yeah,
Lynchburg, yeah, where they
It's
make all the
dry,
beers,
isn't
dry,
it?
yeah.
Where they
absolutely.
make Jack Daniels.
Insane.
You
Completely
can't-
dry.
Yeah,
Alabama still
so-
has dry counties.
Yeah.
We still
Yeah.
have quite a few of dry counties.
Louisiana,
Really?
Louisiana did, at least when
Oh,
I used to
wow.
work there. I remember Louisiana Tech and Grambling were in a parish that was dry.
Yeah.
And then you'd go, literally, you'd take the road out, and literally you'd see entering the next parish, and there was a shack that was like 50
Oh,
yards
right,
on the other
right
side.
as soon as
Yeah,
you
right
cross.
on the
and then
line.
that line was going like a
Oh,
mile back
gosh.
for all
Yeah.
these people buying alcohol.
At this
It was
point, we
so
have
funny.
to keep those because they're so quaint. They're cute. I'm like,
When
oh,
I lived
that's so
in-
darling.
When I lived in Arkansas, Jonesboro was college town, Arkansas State.
Yep.
In Jonesboro, and I think it's Craighead County there, if I remember. But the county was dry, and so you would have to. They had a liquor store, absolutely on the county line, probably called County Line Liquors.
Absolutely.
Very
And
likely.
Friday night, that place was packed out with college kids because you can make county dry, but if you can drive 5-10 miles, they're going to do it. I mean, people will drive further
Yeah.
than that if they have to, if they're in a dry area. But there's still a lot of crazy laws out there.
Yeah.
Mississippi, a lot of the counties there around Jackson were dry for a long time, and I remember when one county passed, you could only buy beer. I may mess this up, but it was along these lines: 6 packs of hot beer at gas
But you
stations.
couldn't cool it off.
Weird.
Oh,
because they
yeah.
didn't want
Pennsylvania
you.
had
So you
that
couldn't
too.
drink it right away.
Yeah.
Right.
In theory.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like,
I
you
get-
could.
I've had, I've
Chug
had
them
warm
hot
beer
just
before.
to show them. So yeah.
Well, Texarkana, Texas, and Arkansas, of course, they're right there on the same. They have a state line road. This side is Texas. The other side is Arkansas. Arkansas was a dry county. Texas was a wet county. And so the convenience stores across, they were like all the convenience stores were on the Texas side because they could sell alcohol, but nobody could sell alcohol on the Arkansas side. So it was just
Yeah,
literally you had to
crazy.
go across the street to get beer. It was crazy.
Hey Jennifer, thanks for joining us. How you doing? And our buddy Stan
Yep.
gave us a quote here. Mississippi, the last dry state in the union, ended prohibition in 1966.
Okay.
And he
Yeah,
said
I
they
knew it
do
was
still
nice.
have
Okay,
dry
okay.
counties in Texas too.
Yeah, that's
So,
insane. It's
yeah.
just, but thankfully
66.
That's crazy.
thankfully they
Jennifer says yes, unrefrigerated, and only 3.2% ABV.
that's
To
terrible.
Yeah.
what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's something.
But fortunately,
3.2.
again, they recovered, and now we have a good beer in Mississippi with Southern Prohibition because
We do.
We're all
There's some good
fanboys,
stuff there.
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, we're seeing that with so many states. I think Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, these are all states that we knew were going to be last. That's
Yeah.
just the way our states are. So, and we get kind of shielded from that being in the Atlanta metro because
Yeah.
we don't feel like small southern towns,
Yeah.
So you don't see that as much. You're like, this is the big city, we're just like any other, but you get down in the rural areas, there's still quite a bit of opposition to that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see, how much we had to fight to make those changes.
Absolutely. 2.5 hours from Huntsville is my hometown, and it's within the last decade that hometown, not the entire county, the hometown finally got enough population to vote either wet or dry. And I was raised in a teetotaler household, and I know all of my family just thought that the world was coming to the end when Hamilton went wet.
oh Lord, exactly.
Yes.
That's it. People
Well,
are
we
just going to be
st-
drinking
you know,
all over the place.
We still see it like watching the proceedings from this year's, from the SB 85 hearings in Georgia. There's still people that are just vehemently opposed, whether it's been a family issue that they've had or just being religious in that. There's some people that just don't think you should touch it. And, for the most part, most craft beer drinkers are fairly responsible. Uber has to make a killing off craft beer folks.
It's a
So,
brilliant
yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I looked at my my tab from Uber for an entire year. It was substantial.
See?
Just write that off as a tax expense.
That's
Exactly.
it, man.
Oh,
Absolutely.
you believe I did?
Work expense.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's.
So,
let's-
guys, we've got a few minutes here going to this last segment. What we'd like to cover is kind of so after the laws changed, kind of the last 10 years, the
Okay.
growth you've seen, and talking some about kind of what you feel is in store for the future.
Well, it's interesting while we were writing the book, because as we were writing it, more breweries kept on
We'll come
popping.
back in
Oh,
just
okay.
a minute. That
Yeah.
was just kind of
That
letting
was
you know
kind of-
what we're
Oh,
saying.
okay.
That was a
That's
teaser.
we're still just running our
Thanks,
mouths
you're
right
just
now.
teasing me.
Yeah.
Should we open something before or
Oh,
no?
you should.
That-
Okay,
that-
Like
let's
that
go.
candy
Wait,
bar.
you have to
Or-
try.
Oh.
This is the one that Blue Pants kept on saying you had to try.
Okay,
So,
I'm good with that.
We can
dry
do
hop
that.
sour.
We can do that.
Los
Man, this is.
pantalones azul.
I am so. It's so cool to see how much good beer we're getting
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean, you know,
that's still
sipping
the
this
stout, right?
this white
yeah.
stout here is just insanely
Jason,
good.
So he did the watermelon wheat for
Yes.
straight to ale.
Uh-huh.
That's Jason. So he worked really closely with straight to ale. So
Yeah. See,
you can
And
see
speaking
that.
of too, I
Was,
mean,
was
so
Straight
good.
to Ale the one that did the really great hef, the really great Hefeweizen, like he ain't Heffy or something like that? It was
Yeah,
one of
he
the
ain't
best.
happy as-
It's
yeah,
one of the
yeah,
best
yeah,
that's
Hefeweizens
yeah.
I've had in a long time
I
now.
was trying to
It's not a
remember the
very
name. I knew
popular
I knew
style
it.
anymore,
Yeah.
but
right, but it's
it was
very
really good.
it's super true to style.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it was just really good. I like that one a lot. So
And
I
speaking
would
of
drink
straight to ale,
Hefeweizen
Yeah.
again if that was available.
that
Or
Project
Golden
Juicy Bunny,
Pint,
I'm
right?
a happy camper with this one. I
Yeah.
drank all of that. So
Okay.
sorry, I drank it all.
Yeah.
This
Well,
was
I'm
my
glad it was
fault.
good. I'm glad it was good.
I just came back from the north. My family's all from the Northeast. I just
Where
came
are
back
you
about a
from?
month ago. Maine, actually.
Okay, me too.
Where
That's-
from?
We used to live in Monmouth, right outside of Augusta.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My family's all from Bangor.
Oh
and,
yeah. Okay, that's where my mother's family is.
I-
There's a,
mean-
there's a
Okay.
Monmouth in Oregon too. So we've
in
got a
New Jersey,
Portland.
yes.
We've got a Portland and a Monmouth that we share in common with Maine.
That's
But
weird.
yeah, I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the
Okay.
only one who has not gone to the University of Maine. That's like I'm
Oh,
the only
okay.
one that didn't go. So
Okay.
I'm completely a black sheep.
You know,
so.
talk about related areas and that. I just learned today that Trillium is a lake in Oregon, Washington.
Oh yeah. There's Oregon, right? It's Trillium. Trillium.
Trillium?
Yeah, I
I
believe
don't
so.
know. Is it?
Yeah.
Maybe Washington. I saw a
I
picture
think it might be
someone
Washington.
posted. So that Stan, can you Google that for us?
Yeah.
Where Trillium Lake
Stan's our
is?
fact checker.
So,
It was
yeah.
also the name
Yeah.
of a Meta messenger back in the day, like in the early 2000s.
I remember that. I
It
can
was
see the little
best.
logo now. It's
Yes.
Trillium. That's
I
right.
loved it, but
That's funny.
it went away. That's what I
That's
think
right.
every time I see it. I'm like, oh, I miss that messenger.
AOL Instant Messenger and
Yahoo
Trillium,
and MSN
Yahoo.
and all those things together. You could do them all at once in ICQ. Yeah.
You've got beer.
ICQ.
Yeah.
I
Remember? You could
forgot
do
about
all of that stuff.
ICQ.
Yeah.
There was a system, and this would have
That's
been
good.
You like it?
97-ish.
I love dry hop sours. This is one of my favorite styles. This is really good.
But it was called like MCOM or M Games, the letter M, and you could go on and play chess, checkers, this and that, and chat with people, and you could voice chat. It was horrible. Like it was like the worst CB radio in the world. But at the time, the technology was still amazing.
Oh, like this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like I'm talking to
So-
someone in Paraguay. So,
Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow.
Crazy
This dry hop
stuff.
sour is delightful.
I do. I like
All
that
right,
a lot.
let me-
So,
Let me see what's
All
up
right.
with that. This, the beer we got right here.
what's wrong with the beer?
Drink's pretty
You
good.
took us out. I'll take us. I'll put us back in. And then
Pretty
we'll
good,
go from
don't
there.
it?
Exactly. All right. Sorry. Too many shenanigans. Here we go.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Now, back to the Beer Guys radio show.
But I was told that I could listen to the radio at a reasonable volume.
And we're back. Beer Guys Radio Show. BeerGuysRadio.com on Facebook, Instagram, and all of the socials. We are talking today with Sarah Bélanger and Cammy. That was the one. That was the name I messed up. Was Cammy.
Cam E is her rap name.
Cam
It's
E.
KM-E. So, but, yeah.
The Cammy Davis is the author of North Alabama Beer and Intoxicating History. Wrapping up here in our fourth segment now. And so we've talked about the Free the Hops movement, the Gourmet Beer Act of 2009, actually legalizing homebrew in 2013, which is shocking. You guys experienced some amazing growth in North Alabama over the past few years.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, they went from like nothing, and then I think within the first year they had 4 different breweries that were at least trying to get on their way, and now we have 9, I believe, with more on their way, because we literally were sending our book to print, and we found out that another brewery is coming to Huntsville as we were sending it to the printer.
It's so
So,
much
yeah.
easier that we do all our writing online where you can edit. Because if you print it, it's going to be, you're
Yeah,
going to have
exactly.
info to add as soon as it's printed,
Theirs
right?
is done. Yes.
Yeah.
So.
We found out with the Atlanta beer book. You look back, and that one's a few years old. It's which is cool that things are changing
Yeah,
that fast.
it is.
So.
Yeah, and it's changed already. We were able to get Governor Bentley's resignation in just under the wire.
Just
so
on there.
that was
Okay,
good. Yeah.
there you go.
We really include that.
So you've got
we were really chasing history when we were writing it, but it really, really took off as far as the breweries with 2011 when we were able to modernize the laws from all the crazy restrictions from the brew pub. And so that from then forward, it's just been revolutionary.
Cammie, what was that change? I remember it and thinking, well, that was odd, but what was it that they made the change at that time for the brew pubs?
Okay, so the Brew Pub Act restricted, you couldn't sell your own beer. It had to be sold to a distributor. That was part of the 3-tier system. And one of the things that made it super expensive was it had to be located in a historic building that before Prohibition brewed beer.
Where do they come?
In the right county, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's
crazy.
Yeah.
Since
so
this,
I think, Sarah, we counted up. There was only like 4 or 6 counties that was.
Yeah, I think there was 7, but it was still really restricted. Yeah, obviously.
So you can brew beer, but you have to have it in this place, in this section, in this building.
Yeah.
You used to brew beer in 1864,
and you can't sell it to the public. You have to get an expensive distributor. Yeah, exactly.
Since this building's already been sullied, but the alcohol devil.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's fine.
It's
It's acceptable, exactly.
So, you got the brew pub law change. I mean, seriously, you guys passed a lot of laws in what really is a short amount of time.
I mean, Free the Hops, the organization Free the Hops was almost like they were just going after one. I mean, they knew exactly what needed to go, and they were just really methodical about it, and they were really reasonable about it, and they just started chipping away to get to where we are now.
So Cammie, you passed the brew pub law, then you got a direct sales law or a pint law where you could serve. Then how did it progress from there, Cammie?
So from 2011, once we got the brew pub squared away, the last thing, one of the first, Free the Hops had 3 major goals. Their last major goal was to up the container size. We were limited to a 16-ounce can or bottle. And, these gourmet beers, it really needs to be a larger bottle. So we got that passed in 2012, which was crazy because it literally was just kind of happened overnight. No fanfare, no big fuss. So that was fabulous to see the education had really worked in our legislature. And then in 2016, we came back and said, hey, we want to be able to have growlers. And the growler bill finally passed in 2016, right as Sarah and I are furiously trying to get everything all wrapped up. And we're like, we got to get this in. So we got that in, and it's just really been beneficial. You can just see by the number of breweries that are still going and doing very well.
And then the ones that are expanding and starting to grow, like you said, I mean, you're just keeping up with you also have to have an online version of your book because it's going so fast.
Yeah. And we will have, I mean, we're trying to keep up with stuff on our own kind of via our blogs and whatnot, but it certainly is just expanding past what we could possibly write about it.
Because you guys are getting in Alabama. I mean, you have brewery districts now. I mean,
they have
is it Avondale area is kind of a brewer's area in Birmingham, and then Campus 805,
right? In
Huntsville.
And Madison is starting to get some. Decatur's actually about to start a brewery, Cross-Eyed Owl. Okay. So I think that's going to be next year. So yeah,
and of course Auburn and Tuscaloosa need to start brewing that too. Exactly.
Yeah.
So those college kids need their beer.
Exactly. Important.
Excellent.
That's awesome. So you've got your brew pub law passed, bigger containers. You can sell your beer out of a brew pub.
Yep. Even Auburn. I mean, you can take classes now. You can get.
That's right.
I think actually a pretty good program from what I heard down there.
I think Robert Lee from Omaha Brewing is one of the guys who did that too. So cool. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up now. We're talking about your book. Your book releases on Monday.
Yes.
How can we get your book?
So you can either come on Monday to Straight to Ale, the Secret Speakeasy, and we'll have a big release party where you can go. We have, if you follow us on our North Alabama Facebook page, we have all of our events on there as well. And of course, Amazon and Books a Million and Barnes and Noble. They're all going to have our book available. So
Excellent.
Good stuff.
Good luck. Thank you so much
thank
for
you so
coming on.
much. This has been fun.
And you
Thank
want to get the
Appreciate it.
book because there's no way we can cover everything
No, I mean,
in the
it
book
like
in an hour.
barely scratched the surface.
Right.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
And it's not a difficult read, by the way. It's a nice,
Thank
easy
you.
read. It's a good. You
Yeah.
can have a couple of beers and drink. And
It has
read
lots of pictures
It does,
too.
yes.
Yeah, so
which is very good. So, Sarah, Cammie, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now let's check out the hot list.
Time for the hot list. The beer guys have the scoop on what's going on next week. Brought to you by CRL Contracting. We build breweries. CRLcontracting.com.
That's hot.
So lots of things going on here, both in Alabama and Georgia. Let's go ahead and get the Alabama stuff here first. Saturday, Dolphin Street in Mobile. They're having their beer festival. So again, today, later on this afternoon. So go check that out if you're heading out to the down south and enjoy that. On Monday, I heard that there's a book release officially. The North Alabama Beer, An Intoxicating History. That's going to be a straight to hail, straight to whatever.
You go straight to hell.
Exactly. It starts at 3 to 10 p.m., but I think you're going to be there at 5:30.
It starts at 5:30.
Yes,
It starts
so,
at 5:30. Yeah.
But I think Free the Hop's having a fundraiser starting at 3, and
Yeah,
then
okay.
at 5:30
That's
the
correct.
actual
Yes.
book signing is
Yep.
going to be there. Brand new brewing, a couple of breweries coming on. Wingman Distribution is going to start this week too. So Diamond Bear Brewing and Fat Bottom Brewing are going to have a welcome party at the Goat House Beer Garden in Montgomery, and also a couple other events too around the area. So check that out. Rocket Republic having a beer dinner at Stand Up Live in Huntsville on Tuesday, and another book signing. So you're going to be busy, Sarah. Book signing at Huntsville, Das Stahl Beer House, and that's going to start at 5 p.m. as well. So lots of stuff going on. What about Georgia?
Georgia, there's a bit going on
Yes.
this week, Aaron. So a little lighter on the front end of the week for some reason,
Gee, I wonder
Aaron.
why.
So,
Yes.
but tomorrow, Sunday, at Orpheus, there's Orphism number 14. They do their concerts there. Check that out. On Monday, we have Cornhole League starting up at Gate City in Roswell. On Tuesday, Oconee Brews and Brushes, painting and beer event. And check that out. And then on Wednesday, we have Team Trivia at Your Pie Perimeter. Grab a friend, go up there. Of course, they have beer specials. And if you're up in my neck of the woods in Woodstock, tacos and trivia at Reformation.
Nice.
On Thursday, the fun starts happening,
Oh, yeah.
Aaron. This is it. So Thursday the 31st, we're having a couple of midnight events. We also have a couple other breweries that are doing kind of the final tour in Georgia. You know, go out there, check them out if you want to. Eventide is going to have a final tour before midnight. Then at midnight, they're going to start direct sales there in your Georgia brewery. If you're up on the north side of town, Burnt Hickory Brewery is also going to have a midnight event. 12 o'clock, first 10 people in line get a beer for only 91 cents, 9-1. Let's see what they did
get
there.
it. Okay.
So, and you can buy, it just sounds so crazy saying this, folks, up to a case of beer, 288 ounces to take with you.
Crazy.
So it'll be there. Then, of course, on Friday, I mean, it just opens up. You know, there's so
Yeah.
many events throughout the weekend. We've got, as I mentioned, the Eventide and Burnt Hickory midnight events. We've got bottle releases at a lot of breweries. Brian mentioned German chocolate cake from Three Taverns as being one of his favorites. They're going to release that on September 1st. They're also going to release, I think it's Blueberry and Septus.
Yes.
Is that
so,
correct?
yes.
And they've got another one that they're going to announce on 9/1, another surprise coming out. So Wild Heaven's going to have some vintage bottles available. Lots of beers on tap. Almost every brewery is going to have some kind of event throughout that weekend. We'll send out, we had This Week in Georgia Beer that has that list on there. Check our calendar for any updates in that. But it's a good week to be in Georgia if you're a craft beer
a big
fan.
week. So time for a giveaway, though. What do we got going on?
Our winner this week, Aaron, is Terry Waters. So thank you, Terry, so much for subscribing to This Week in Georgia Beer. Drop us an email to beerguys@beerguysradio.com, and we'll get you a very cool swag pack out. And Aaron, if folks want to join in the fun and try and win a swag pack, how would they do that?
Super easy. Visit beerguysradio.com. Sign up for This Week in Georgia Beer. You'll get your weekly newsletter with all the happenings in Georgia beer, and you'll also be entered to win our weekly swag pack. Coming up next week, again, like we said, a big deal. We're talking direct sales to the public. Nancy Palmer from the Georgia Craft Brewers Guild and craft beer lawyer Taylor Harper will join us, and maybe a few more. So check us out at beerguysradio.com and on the socials. Don't forget to drink local. Have a good one. Cheers.